Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Faster Masters Rowing Radio. I'm Rebecca Caro, and as ever, I'm joined by Marlene Royal.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be with you again today.
So Faster Masters Rowing Radio is the podcast made each week by Marlene and myself. We're part of the RowingChat network, which is a network of rowing-related podcasts. They're about all sorts of different topics, and they're made by creators from all over the world. If you want to follow and subscribe, go to rowing.chat and hit the subscribe button, and you can get either the RSS feed into your podcast app. You can search for us on Spotify, on Google Play, on SoundCloud, on Apple Podcasts. But we would love for you also to subscribe if you want to get a weekly email, which has links to each of the podcasts if you just prefer to listen to them on a browser, and that's on rowing.chat. We are delighted that we have some amazing companies sponsoring our programming. Without them, this wouldn't be possible. And so I would ask you to firstly go and have a look at what they have to offer and see if you can help us by helping them. Our first sponsor is Faster Masters Magazine. It's a membership for Masters rowers who are keen to learn. Are you just like a sponge, just sucking up more and more information and tips about rowing? By becoming a student of the sport of rowing, learning will give you confidence in your own rowing practice. This monthly magazine is authored by Marlene and myself, and it gives you 4 articles every month. A technique article, which for this month is a video about creating rhythm and run. A performance article. For September, this is about breathing when rowing. A rowing lifestyle article, and this month is about your sleep checklist. And a bonus interview. This month, it is a video interview with the author of the Kabooma book, which is about successful athlete aging. The magazine is written by coaches who both row and coach masters who understand what masters need from rowing. You can find out more at fastermastersrowing.com, and it's the magazine. Our second sponsor is Castelldefels Stage Esport. Are you planning a training camp in Spain? Let us introduce you to the sports travel agency who will smooth your path to a fantastic camp. Castelldefels Stage Esport is a specialist tour operator who books sports camps for rowers. They specialize in the Spanish region of Catalunya, which is near to Barcelona and Lake Banyoles. All you need to do is tell them the dates you'd like to come, and they will do the rest. They book the hotels, the transport, the boats, the training venue at Lake Banyoles, the food, and the excursions. All you have to do is show up with your coach and a training program. The team are taking bookings now for dates right through to Easter 2021. Get in touch using the link on rowing.chat/sponsors and ask for Jordi. He speaks perfect English, and don't forget to mention RowingChat when you book. Our third sponsor is The Science of Rowing, a new monthly publication by the Strength Coach Roundtable podcast hosts, Will Ruth, Blake Gourley, and Joe DeLeo. Each month, members get 3 takeaway focused research reviews on rowing training and performance, a bonus video, and graphic content to help move the knowledge into application. And they get a podcast episode of the trio digging further into the practical takeaways. To find out more, go to scienceofrowing.com/rowingchat. And on that page, you'll get the details, you'll get a free sample issue and a special discount offer. Now, I'm also keen to welcome everybody who's watching live. If you're watching live, here we go. Our first viewer is Steve Shimomura from Japan.
Awesome.
Nice to meet you, Steve. And then Syed Abbas, who says hi, and Cici Aguda, who is a lovely regular. While you're watching live, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments underneath the live stream, and we will do our best to get to them and to answer your questions or to use your remarks. You don't have to ask a question. You can just say, I agree with what you say, or I disagree. Disagreement's good, isn't it? Now, we've also got a newsletter for Faster Masters Rowing, which gets you links to this podcast. So if you don't always watch us live because the time zone doesn't work, or people in Australia are still at work or getting up, or people in the East Coast of the USA have gone to bed, or Great Britain have gone to bed, join our newsletter and you'll get links to the shows. And you also get other little hints and tips, which Marlene and I pepper around as a thank you for joining the newsletter. You can find it at fastermastersrowing.com/newsletter. I'm just going to show you what that page looks like. So here it is. It's the website is fastermastersrowing.com/newsletter. And it says, are you ready to get confident rowing and sculling? And we list the things that you will receive. You'll get links to some of the podcast episodes, popular questions answered, technique drills that will get you confident. And this is a good way to also become a bit of a student of the sport of rowing. And you will hear Marleneisms. Trust us, you want to hear these, as well as my rowing tales and anecdotes. There's a simple subscribe form. And at the bottom, there are some very nice testimonials from some of our listeners who explain why they enjoy listening and why they choose to subscribe to the newsletter. So that's fastermastersrowing.com/newsletter. And the link is in these the notes underneath the podcast, which I publish afterwards. Hey, we've got another couple of visitors. Sarah Younger Merrill. Hi, Sarah.
Yes, from Maine.
Nice to see you. And Historias de Remador from Brazil. So you're a rowing historian.
Excellent. And I trained years ago in Florianopolis in the winter of 2000. I trained at the clubs in Florianopolis for 3 months.
Fantastic.
So I think we have 4 countries right now.
Yay! We've got nearly all the continents. Who are we missing? Europe. Europe's going.
Yeah, we're the Europeans.
What have you been up to this week, Marlene?
Well, I was part of the U.S. Rowing Virtual Masters Camp, which took place for 3 weeks, the last 2 weeks of August and all of last week, and wrapped up last Friday. And it was a pretty incredible experience all around. I had 2 of my own presentations. One was a webinar of a functional movement assessment for rowing. The other one was my presentation, Technique as You Age, with a little bit of modifications for the audience that we had for the U.S. Rowing Masters Camp. I also had a really terrific experience presenting the Sport Science series, which were a series of videos made by Mark Novak, who is the physical therapist for the U.S. National team, rowing team. And he did a very nice series of exercises in the clinic. And I presented those videos because Mark is back working with the national team right now. So I presented those videos and then had led the discussion and the questions and answers with the Masters rowers who were live on the Zoom call. And one of the things that were really built into Mark's message, and granted, he's working with the elite team. He also works with, he worked with the Junior Virtual Masters Camp, which was just before the Masters. And things that he really emphasized were a lot of stabilization exercises. He had some really interesting creative exercises for like scapular stabilization and stabilizing the low back, and a lot of activation exercises like for the lats, for the glutes, exercises that really even something like a dead bug, right, which is a classical core exercise, for example, like everybody does dead bugs. But when Mark teaches you how to do a dead bug, like after 10 reps, like your abs and you're just burning, you know, because he has you holding a Swiss ball with your knees up and your arms up, and you're holding the Swiss ball, and then you're moving in very controlled motions. And things that he really emphasizes in the clinic that he wants you to take to the boat are controlling your movements. You know, try to avoid extreme movements and don't go into a movement pattern that you can't control, for example. So stabilization of the shoulders, posture. He really emphasizes posture and a neutral spine and pivoting at the hip. All his exercises that were done on land emphasized the breathing pattern, which we talked a little bit about last week, I believe, and making that part of everything you do in your training so that you also bring that into the boat. Mobilizing, a lot of things for stretching your hip flexors and stretching your lats. A lot of exercises stabilizing the spine and then working on stretching those muscles, which can get quite tight. So for masters athletes, if your lats are tight, oftentimes that can show up as you arching your back. You're not able to keep your back in a neutral spine because your lats could be tight or your hip flexors could be tight. So it was really interesting to go through. Each series was about 50 minutes of exercises. And then he showed you how to unwind with the tennis ball and foam roller and get on some key spots. So that was kind of a special thing for me to do that I really enjoyed. And it was very interesting to learn some new complex movements, a lot of one-sided or crossing the midline type of exercises, a lot of things with balance. So it was really quite interesting. And what were you up to this week?
You were obviously doing the exercises, weren't you? You weren't just watching.
Well, I did them all before. I mean, I did them all before. I had to watch the video before that. But a lot of the people who were watching it, they were actually doing the exercises along with the video. And then we were pausing and answering questions and talking about them.
So just before we move on, do you think the medium of Zoom calls works for a virtual camp?
It did work. I think it definitely worked. Obviously, for the presenter, it's a little bit strange because when you share your screen, you can't see your audience. So you're talking, and that's the thing that I think makes some people feel a little bit uncomfortable with it because they can't see who they're talking to. You're looking at your own screen. But when you click back to the questions, when you can see everybody on the grid and see people's faces, you know, then I think it works all right. But the beauty of this format is that all the presentations, I mean, and there were an incredible number of speakers about biomechanics and rigging and yoga and the US weightlifting coach. And I mean, it was just incredible, but it's all recorded for the people who joined the camp. So we have access to it on an unlimited basis. So it was a really great resource for masters.
So a question to our listeners: if Marlene and I hosted maybe a weekend camp, a Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, would you be interested? And it would consist of online sessions, as Marlene has described, and suggested workouts, which you could then do in your own time. And then we could, you know, come back and review them. So if you're interested, let us know. And if there are enough people, we could run one.
For the Masters camp, it was a 3-week camp. I actually wrote the training program for it as well. So there was a 3-week erg training program that went along with it. And people were erging who wanted to in the Zoom room. So there were some people doing it on their own and some people doing it together. So it was fun. Yeah, it was definitely like an online conference, but you certainly could do some live coaching that way as well.
So we have one person saying emphatically yes.
Yes.
Thank you. That is good to know. Really good. Yeah, let us know what you think. It might be fun to enable people who've never tried the Faster Masters before to maybe try a little toe in the water. Now, I've been up to something a little different from Marlene. Here in New Zealand, I wrote a rather provocative article that went into our rowing magazine in March called The Frustrations of Masters Rowers. And as a result of that, a bunch of masters came forward and said, yeah, we have those frustrations too. What can we do to improve how things work for us? And so I'm going to show you what we've been doing. New Zealand Rowing have set up a Facebook group for us called New Zealand Masters Rowers, which is great. We already have 300 members, and we're using it as a place to start some early stage discussions and discovery about what people want. And so if you're in New Zealand, please join this group. And I've put up a poll here, which from our first discussion, it was clear that communication was a big area of interest. And so I put up here a list of topics that people might like to know about. And the topics so far are regattas, locally or regionally, national regattas, borrowing or lending boats for regattas, finding rowers to fill seats for regattas, getting optimal rigging suggestions for masters when they're using shared junior boats, technique, tips and advice, wanting to visit a club as a guest, coxing training for masters, asking for ideas, and getting feedback. And so if anybody is keen to join in, it's going to be a slow iterative process. But the next thing that we're going to be working on is a regatta calendar, or just a calendar generally, because one of the things that it's very clear for masters is many of us are happy just to meet and go rowing together, or have a little social and a row, which could be breakfast, or it could be something in the evening, or it could be brunch, and how set up ways that people can publicize what they're doing, so that if you're in the area or want to organize your life to be in the area, you can come and join in with us. Now, I have a secret hope that actually other countries might want to follow this model. And so I'll give some updates as we go along. And if you want to copy what we're doing, we just love it. We do think it's really important for masters to have a national voice, because as you all know, national federations tend to be very focused, firstly, on the international scene, and secondly, on juniors, because obviously there are safety and safeguarding issues around juniors. And the rest of us kind of get a little bit left to our own devices. Now, there was a great discussion on the Facebook Masters Rowing International group. Who do you share your water with? Marlene?
Well, where I row right now at Lac Brome in Knowlton, Quebec, we have some swimmers, some stand-up paddleboard paddlers, not a ton, but we probably have more canoeists and kayakers on our lake on one side. On the other side, we do have some motor. Our lake is sort of shaped like a hand, and it's about 22 kilometers around. So it's a fairly large lake. Much of it is protected from the west side, but we do have some motorboats and water skiers who go in one section of the lake. They have a course there. So we have to share with them sometimes, but they don't tend to be as much on the side of the lake where we row. I think, with the canoeists and the kayakers, there isn't really that big of an issue with traffic patterns, simply because we do have a relatively large lake. What is a problem sometimes is swimmers who are swimming across our traffic pattern. And in the summertime. When I lived in Whistler, BC, we trained on a 2-kilometer lake called Alta Lake, and that's where the Canadian Ironman is run also. So there is a designated swimming lane that goes up one side of the lake, and obviously as rowers we row on the other side of that, and we row. It's a long, narrow lake, but at the Alta Lake in Whistler, any swimmer is required to wear a really bright bathing cap, because if they're not wearing a bathing cap, you simply cannot see them from the water. And that is one thing we encountered a little bit this summer, is that people swimming out more into the middle of the lake instead of swimming along the shore, and you would have to be very careful that you could see them. So we do have a lot of water sports on our lake. The motorboat traffic is nothing over the top whatsoever. Now after Labor Day, everybody's gone, so we have the lake to ourselves again. But yeah, a lot of outdoor enthusiasts for sure.
We had a jet skier this weekend. We were up on the Upper Harbour, we have two places where we row. One is on obviously the sea, and the other's our lake. And I was in a crew with some people who are newer rowers, and they'd never been on the salt water for one, and so you get that feeling of the tide pulling and how water swirls around obstacles. Plus we have a few moored boats that we have to navigate, not too many. And the jet skier was really interesting because he saw us and he was very respectful and went past at high speed a long way away but parallel to us, and of course he was long gone by the time the wake got to us. And you get that kind of feeling of a little bit of rock underneath you, which can be really unnerving if you don't know how to deal with it.
Well, it's hard to deal with that kind of side wake. Oh, Laura Gamble, yes, you row in a busy harbor, actually.
Laura says she rows with tugboats, cruise ships, tankers, and fishermen. An eclectic group.
Yes, yeah. You have some big ships, definitely.
The thing I find, tugboats are extraordinary because they're so powerful. They make huge wakes, in my experience. Cruise ships are just weird because it's kind of like sculling past a block of flats, apartment building.
I got waked by a destroyer once. That was an experience. I was rowing in Greece at the island of Poros, which is, if anybody's ever heard of the trireme years ago, that's where the trireme lives in Greece. And there's a Navy base there, but it's one of the main rowing clubs in Greece. And I was living there for a while, and I was out rowing. It's almost like a perfect basin, but it's between the land and the island. And there's like one inlet in and then another inlet out. And it forms this perfect oval basin. And this destroyer came in and threw such a wake that I went up on top of the wake, and then I came down into the middle. And when I was in the middle, my oars were sticking into the side of the wake up to the oar locks, and it was over my head. I could not see the land. And all I thought was, don't let go of your oars. Just don't let go of your oars. Just whatever you do. And then I came back up again and then came back down. But that was a slow, frightening experience.
You stopped rowing?
I did. Well, I had no choice. There was nowhere to go. I was like in the trough. So, but.
Laura says cruise ships are so quiet, they sneak up on you. Yeah. Wow. That's quite something. Yeah, definitely need to look around. Now we're going to move on to our big topic for today, which is about the finish. Marlene, kick off and tell us about coaching the release, because we've been sharing some stories this week.
Yes.
We've both been working on.
Yeah, we've been with our scholars. We've been working on the release, and it's definitely an area of the stroke cycle that takes some work. It takes attention. You have to practice drills. You have to slow down in order to find the timing for the release. And some of the classical flaws that I see when I'm out on the water is the sculler's just trying to do everything too fast. Instead of separating motions like exit, feather, they're trying to blend everything into one motion. So what happens is the oar handles get to the body and then the oars feather, but the oars are still in the water. So of course it's very difficult to get the oars out of the water. So that's one thing, is just, we've talked about blade work before, and learning good blade work and learning your feather squaring when you're out of the water, not when you're in the water, is a big difference. The hands not coming in level so that you've got room to get out of the water. If you're starting to feather on the drive as your hands are coming into your body, we're often seeing the wrist bend. And when the wrists bend, they take up space between your handles and your thighs. So you don't have any room to tap down at that point. Holding good balance and stability as the oars are coming out of the water. So these are all things, along with timing, that affect the release. And, just working on making sure the release is being timed well with the end of your leg drive and your swing and your hands is really important, versus trying to like pull the handles into the release, because that's going to put your weight in the wrong direction or down on the seat. But it really is a challenge to keep things moving, keep things in motion smoothly and with flow at the release, and not trying to work too hard. I think that's the key there, is you have to have a little softness in your hands. You have to regulate tension so that you're not grinding through that turn, which is going to slow everything down and get you stuck.
It's a very fine line, as you say. Regulate the tension, soften your hands, but if you are too soft, the little hole behind your blade is coming through the water piles up in front of the blade, because obviously you're pushing it, and there's a little void behind the blade. But if you cease to accelerate, the void fills in, and you therefore find it harder to get the blade out of the water. So it really is an incredibly refined movement.
Yes, it's tricky. And the other thing is, because you're building up speed, as we talked about, you're building up speed, and your boat is going to move faster after the release, not at the release. It's going to continue to gain momentum. So you've got a lot going on in terms of where you apply your weight and your pressures to stay with that, so that you keep everything in motion. I think that's the thing, is like not trying to work faster than the boat. You have to stay with the boat, but you don't have to do anything faster than the boat.
Well, you're usually killing boat speed if you're trying to be faster than the boat.
Yes, right. Yes,
or you're gripping your blades through the water, which again isn't gripping the water. So it's generally not a great plan. Let's talk a little bit about how you can tell whether your release is clean and good. And the best way to do that is to look at your puddles. So that's the stain in the water that's left by your blade after it's been taken out. Ideally, you want the puddle to be a tight circle. There may be a little bit of white water, but not very much. It's not frothy. And after the oar has exited the water, you should see that puddle as a circular entity just begin to move past your stern. If your release is slightly less than perfect, what you'll see is that puddle, instead of being circular, becomes teardrop shaped, because the teardrop, the point, is your blade dragging along the water. And that's either that it's not coming out clean, or perhaps you're trying to feather under the water, or you're doing what Marlene described earlier, which is trying to exit and feather as a blended movement, and you're not clearing the surface of the water. And particularly if you have very flat water, this is very, very obvious. You see a little trail of dribbles where the bottom end of the blade is slowly coming out of the water, and the boat is obviously moving and it drags that blade. And of course, that is a drag. That is slowing you down. So I'm not talking about the droplets of water that come off your blade because it's gotten wet. I'm actually talking about additional water that you can see really, really clearly.
Can you hear me, Rebecca? There, I think you lost me for a second there. Did you lose the connection? I lost the connection. Oh, I lost the connection for a second, and it just asked me to reconnect into the podcast. So
you're still with us. I'm talking about dribbles coming off the bottom end of the blade. So one of the things that you can look for yourself is, are you getting a clean release? And you can see that for yourself. You don't need a coach to tell you what's going on. And that's a very good initial starting point. One of the other things you can look at, if you're in a crew boat, have the person sitting in front of you. So you can't really do this at stroke unless you have a GoPro mounted on the boat. Stop rowing and turn around and watch you row on your own. And what you're looking for is, do your handles finish up by your rib cage, or do your handles finish down in your lap with your wrist? Instead of being flat like this, your wrist gets cocked. And as Marlene said earlier, you then have no room to tap down because that depression in your wrist is taking up all the space between the handle and your thighs, which are here right under your wrist. So where are you finishing and where are you tapping down to? And particularly for people who know that they have a challenge with not having a horizontal draw, sometimes people call that rowing over the barrel. And what it will look like if you're being videoed from the side is that if my fingertip is your handles at the catch, the handles rise slightly through the power phase and then they descend down to your lap at the finish and then go horizontal. And obviously what you actually want is for the handles to be pretty horizontal through the power phase and then descend at the finish. So if you know that's something that you have a personal challenge with, one way to improve the finish part is to ensure that your handles are drawn up to your rib cage at the finish rather than pushed down into your lap.
And making sure that your oarlocks are adjusted correctly to do that. That's also, if you're rigged too low, that's going to be very difficult for you to do. Actually, Jeanette has a question for us.
Jeanette says, hi, should the blade come out at exactly the same time as the knees go down? No, Jeanette, they should not. So in the power phase, the sequence of body parts is legs, back, arms, broadly. And your legs in general have already gone straight before you finish the stroke. It may be momentary, but it is definitely not. You don't want to be finishing everything together. That's a sort of dinghy style of rowing, and it will probably lead to a slightly shorter stroke. So no, ideally you want your leg drive to be finished. As your legs are finishing, your back is swinging. And your arm draw comes into the backswing, but your legs will be finished. Do you want to add anything?
I think it's important to blend everything together. Like, it shouldn't be a very segmented blend. But one thing I do teach some of my rowers is use, when the legs go down, you will see that your blades are starting to come out of the water. So they will start to release at that point because they're designed to do so. Which is about 35 degrees. What in a rigging talk that Volker Nolte did, he was recommending for masters that when they sit at the release position, that they have about 15 centimeters between the tips of their handles. And that will set your release angle at the correct angle where you want the blades to come out of the angle. So you don't want to be very segmented, but things have to blend together relatively quickly as you get to the release, because your body and hands are also accelerating as you move through the drive. But if you use and I often use when the knees go down as a time to tap out, because by the time your knees go down, you have to register it takes that microsecond to register that you have to tap out. Then it's time. By the time that registers, it's time to tap out. So
worth experimenting with your release timing.
Or try even taking the blade out a little bit early and see what happens. Like maybe it's better.
Exactly. A nice remark from our friend in Brazil who said this is a very good matter, which I read as a very good natter, which it is too. Now, rolling back, have we finished talking about the release? We got anything else?
I think so. I think we want to encourage people to do drills and to be patient. Practice it stationary, practice it slowly, be attentive to look at your blade and see what it's doing.
Yeah. One thing with any drill that you do, in my experience, the third time you do it is the best time. So expect to do that drill several times in a single practice outing. And I would say if the point about the drill is usually to isolate a part of the stroke, practice that. Then you need to make it progressively harder for yourself as you acquire skill in doing the drill. So the first time around is, am I executing the drill correctly? The second time around is, let's do this with maybe a half pressure. And ideally you want to be able to do your drills at firm pressure, which is challenging. So you can build up to that. But the reason is that you then have you're working really hard and you're also trying to handle the blades really skillfully. And that's hard to do. And remember, any exercise, it's like walking up a flight of steps, that you take 2 steps up in your drill. The drill does not go well. You can always drop back down a step. So maybe back down to half pressure, do the drill again at half pressure, then step up again and do it at firm pressure, and practice that so that it's better to execute skillfully, then push on, see where you fail, and then go back to where you can do it skillfully. Then let time pass, let a day, 2 days go by, and then try it again, because your body acquires these skills progressively. And remember that when you're tired, it's much harder to be really skillful in a new movement pattern. So better then to say, right, no, we've done enough for today. Quit while you're ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go for a run.
Exactly. Note where you found it challenging. So maybe you were like, we were really great at rate 23, but by the time we went to 24 or 26, it didn't work. And then next time you can then see whether you've managed to progress past that.
So Claudia Pace writes a comment. I rode the Olympias time trials in 1990 out of Porus Naval Base. Well, I think we must have missed each other by about 6 months.
There we go. That would have been
rowing. I was rowing out of there all spring of '89.
Wow. And Claudia, where are you rowing now? Are you still rowing in Greece or not? Look, her photograph even has her carrying her single.
Yeah, that's a nice picture.
And we have a remark from our earlier discussion about who do you share your water with. Penny Johnston says, oh my goodness, the fishermen that just lurk on the rowing course waiting for you to run into them. They don't sound so frightening anymore.
No, well, I forgot to mention fishermen. We have a lot of fishermen actually, but you know what? They're quite polite, but they never say a word. I think fishermen around the world never say a word.
They don't. I got a round of applause from some when we were on a New Year's camp on a reservoir in the south of France, and the lake level had been dropping each day, and I was being careless and not looking around as often as I should. And my bow just went up this little wee sandbank right in front of these fishermen. And they were like, I was furious, particularly as I had to get out of the boat to push myself off. I was so well wedged.
Oh, gosh. Oh, so Claudia, she rows at Sagamore Rowing Club.
Where is Sagamore?
That's Long Island. Is that correct, Claudia?
See, I rely on your knowledge, your geographical knowledge, Marlene.
You know Australia better than I do, so I rely on you for New Zealand and Australia.
Excellent. Well, Penny comes back on her fishermen. She says, I think they're out there fishing, so they don't have to talk to anyone. She says, sometimes I stop for a chat just to annoy them.
Right, but scare the fish. That's our new mission.
Well, Emily, who is a French girl I row with, has some very classy phrases said in a wonderful French accented English. And she calls it going fishing when she digs too deep. God, get a fish.
Get a fish.
Thank you, everybody who's watching live with us today. It's been an absolute delight having you along. Please remember to join our newsletter, which is fastermastersrowing.com/newsletter. We would love to have you along for the ride. And to everybody else, we've just had a blast today. Keep working on your finishes. We all can improve. We can always improve our finishes. And till next time, bye-bye.
See you next week.